a son stands in silence before a judge. Not accused of hurting strangers. Not accused of a crime of passion. He is accused of killing the two people who raised him. But the most unsettling question isn't what happened. It's how a family reaches a point where this becomes possible. Before the charges, before the courtroom, before the headlines, there is a man named Nick Reiner. Nick Reiner is 32 years old. He is currently in custody, accused, not convicted, of killing his parents. Those are the facts. And in a case like this, facts matter more than assumptions. Psychology does not begin by deciding who is guilty. It begins by asking how a person arrives at this moment. Very little about Nick Reiner's private life was known to the public before this case. There were no public warnings, no viral controversies, no clear signs visible to the outside world of what would later unfold. Like many cases involving family violence, much of what matters happened away from cameras, inside private spaces where conflict often goes unseen. Nick Reiner has been formally charged. He appeared in court, and his legal process has begun. At his initial court appearance, his defense requested a continuance of the arraignment, waiving his constitutional right to a speedy arraignment. The court granted that request. The arraignment is now scheduled for January 7, 2026. No plea has been entered, and nothing has been decided. When courts and psychologists examine cases involving family members, they do not diagnose from headlines. They look for patterns, not labels. Patterns such as emotional dysregulation, difficulty managing intense emotions over time. Patterns of dependency, where personal identity becomes closely tied to family relationships. Patterns of long-term family conflict, sometimes quiet, sometimes unresolved. And in some cases, signs of resentment or identity struggle, not always visible and not always spoken aloud. These are not conclusions. They are questions the justice system is now required to ask. Psychology doesn't ask who is evil. It asks what breaks first. Do you believe people snap suddenly? Or is it something that builds quietly over time? Let us know what you think in the comments. After focusing on the accused, the story now shifts, because every criminal case has another center of gravity. The people who did not walk into that courtroom. Nick Reiner's parents are the two victims named in this case. In court records, they are identified by name. In headlines, they are described as victims. But beyond the language of the law, they were much more personal. They were parents. They were adults with established lives, routines, and relationships. They were part of a family. They were part of a community. Whatever disagreements or struggles may have existed privately, one fact is clear. They were Nick Reiner's parents, and that relationship defines the case in a way that commands attention. Their role as parents. Parenthood is not just a legal title. It is a long-term bond built over years through responsibility, expectation, and emotional connection. When a crime occurs within a family, the loss is not limited to a single moment. It reshapes every memory, every connection, and every relationship. The weight of the loss. This crime did not end with 2 lives lost. It fractured a family, left unanswered questions, and forced those who remain to reconcile love, grief, and the reality of criminal charges. These are consequences that no courtroom ruling can fully resolve. They weren't just victims in a case file. They were parents, and this is what makes the story unbearable. Interactive moment. When a crime happens inside a family, do you think the damage is ever truly contained? Share your thoughts in the comments, respectfully. Now that we've explored the people involved, it's time to examine the case itself, separating what is confirmed. According to court records, Nick Reiner has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in connection with the deaths of his parents. Investigators allege that the killings took place on December 14, 2025, inside the family's Los Angeles home. The court has confirmed that Nick Reiner was arrested later that same day and is currently held without bail. At his initial court appearance, his defense requested a continuance of the arraignment, waiving his constitutional right to a speedy arraignment. The arraignment is now scheduled for January 7, 2026. What remains unanswered? Despite these formal charges, many details are still unknown. Investigators have not yet established a clear motive, and the circumstances leading up to the tragic event remain under review. It is also unclear how any long-term family dynamics or private struggles may have played a role. These are questions that the court and investigators will continue to examine. What prosecutors must prove? To secure a conviction, prosecutors must show that Nick Reiner intentionally caused the deaths of his parents and that the act was premeditated. They must present a chain of evidence connecting him to the crime and prove that he acted with knowledge and intent. Until the trial is complete, all of these elements remain to be confirmed in court. This case leaves many questions unanswered. What parts of this story do you think the trial still hasn't revealed? Share your thoughts in the comments, respectfully. Now that we understand the case itself, we turn to the law, the framework that determines consequences, not emotions. According to court records, Nick Reiner faces 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. Special circumstances can include multiple victims or the use of a deadly weapon, and if proven, can influence sentencing. What conviction could legally mean? If convicted, Nick Reiner could face life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. California law also allows for the death penalty under certain conditions, though the state has not carried out an execution in many years. Regardless of the sentence, the legal system focuses on accountability, not revenge. The law measures actions, not emotions. Psychological reality of sentencing. Beyond the courtroom, conviction carries a weight that is both physical and mental. A life sentence means permanent loss of freedom, no family gatherings, no normal life milestones. It also means living with the knowledge of the act, every day for every year. The law does not ask why you felt pain. It asks what you did with it. In cases like this, the sentence is more than punishment. It is the system's way of ensuring that society and the victims receive justice, and that no action escapes consequence. Crimes committed within a family are some of the most unsettling. They confront society with a question few are prepared to answer: how could someone harm the people who raised them? Family violence psychology. Research shows that family violence is often rooted in long-term patterns of conflict, tension, or emotional dysregulation. It is not always sudden. Sometimes it builds quietly over years, unnoticed by outsiders. Why crimes against parents shock society? When parents are the victims, the act challenges our most basic assumptions about safety and trust. Parents are generally seen as protectors, not targets, and the violation of that bond creates a deep emotional shock. Warning signs often ignored. Studies and expert analyses identify several patterns that can precede family violence, including persistent family conflict, unresolved emotional disputes, difficulty managing strong emotions over time. While not every family with conflict experiences violence, these patterns can indicate risk if left unaddressed. How unresolved conflict can turn dangerous. Unchecked anger, resentment, or feelings of helplessness can accumulate. In some cases, these unresolved emotions can contribute to serious and even fatal outcomes, especially when combined with other stressors or personal struggles. Psychology does not declare guilt. It does not excuse action. It simply asks, What happens when conflict is left unresolved, when patterns are ignored, and when the consequences become irreversible? Looking at this case, do you think family conflicts are something that quietly escalate, or do they usually erupt suddenly? Share your thoughts in the comments. This case is still unfolding. But one truth is already final: nothing can undo what was lost. Crimes within a family force us to confront questions we cannot ignore. They remind us of the fragility of trust, the weight of unresolved conflict, and the irreversible consequences of a single moment. Do you believe this was a moment of rage, or a lifetime building toward one? Share your thoughts in the comments, respectfully. As this case continues to unfold, we are reminded that behind every headline are real lives, real loss, and real lessons. Family violence leaves consequences that no verdict can erase. Awareness, vigilance, and understanding are the first steps in preventing tragedies before they occur. At Crime Lab Stories, we are committed to telling these stories with accuracy, respect, and care, to shed light, not to sensationalize. Stay informed. Stay aware. And remember, understanding the patterns of human behavior can help protect yourself and those you love.